Alrighty, everyone. Hello. Happy New Year. Welcome to the series, Mudd Talks, Customer Experience Using Empathy and Analytics to Build Experiences that Delight with Jackie Olmos-Lym, Class of 13, and Rebecca Streitz, Class of 13. My name is Vanessa Chu, Assistant Director in the Office of Alumni and Parent Relations. We thank you for attending our first Mudd Talks of 2021, and we hope you and your family are safe and healthy during this time. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed along with any presentation materials after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat, and we will try to get through as many questions as we can after the presentation. Now, to briefly introduce our speakers, Jackie Olmos-Lym and Rebecca Streitz both graduated from Harvey Mudd in 2013 with a degree in engineering. Jackie is a San Francisco-based strategist, most energized by projects at the intersection of strategy, analytics, and technology innovation. She is currently the Vice President in Customer Excellence at Wells Fargo. Rebecca is currently a release manager overseeing software development and operations at Medallia, the market leader in experience management. I now turn it over to you ladies. Take it away.
Thanks, Vanessa. And we already have a question. What is the music?
So the music is actually created by HMC Communications Department. So thank you to you all.
All right. Okay, well, I'm going to get us started. So customer experience is how customers feel about a company. The bulk of customer experience is determined throughout the customer lifecycle, from research through purchase, use, all the way to support or even end of life. Secondhand interactions, such as marketing, media coverage, and word of mouth, also contribute to CX, customer experience. Effort, emotion, and expectation are key drivers of delightful customer experiences. I think we can all kind of think about some low effort experiences, but my favorite example is a Domino's pizza tracker. When you're hungry, it's good to know exactly where your pizza is versus having to call to find out if it's 2 minutes away or 2 hours away. Today's car commercials are great examples of the role of emotion in customer experience. Car commercials used to highlight horsepower or 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Today, they tout how a car will bring a family closer together or how exciting it is to drive. Lastly, but perhaps most acutely, is expectation. Consumers expect fast digital experiences. Even in business-to-business settings, those expectations are in play. So, customers expect things like Uber or Netflix. And when their expectations are not met, they are very vocal. The below quote highlights an example of the effort, emotion, expectation of customer experience. Effort, emotion, and expectation have become more important over the last year as companies adapt to new ways of doing business. And it's become more apparent when great experience or not so great experience is being delivered. This article profiles Aris, the CEO of a natural skincare brand in the UK, as he tries to reset his online banking credentials with the British bank HSBC. So effort-wise, he spent hours on hold and was transferred multiple times. When it comes to effort, customers get the exact experience intentionally and unintentionally designed for them. For example, HSBC may have trained their call center representatives to have deep domain expertise in business banking or in building credit. But an unintentional effect is that each individual representative is less likely to know how to reset online banking, leading to multiple transfers. Emotionally, Aris felt let down, possibly because he was afraid of being exposed to COVID in the branch, or his emotional bandwidth was focused on his business, not on banking. And he tells us that his expectations weren't met, saying, "You're not telling me that HSBC does not have the money or resources to put effective systems in place to manage customer service." As expectations change, customer experience is becoming more important as a differentiator. In the past, customers were alone while they interacted with companies, while companies had sales and support teams that dictated experiences. Today, customers can band together through social media to have a much larger voice in how companies operate. Twitch is an example of this. Twitch is a video streaming platform where broadcasters live stream content like video games or original talk shows. Twitch changed a feature on their platform to reduce spam. On October 2nd, they received feedback through social media that this change made it more difficult for small broadcasters to network with each other. This goes back to an example of how customers get the experience that's intentionally and unintentionally designed for them. They made the change for a good reason, but it had an unintentional negative effect. By October 7th, Twitch had responded to social media, letting customers know that they were working on a fix to the issue. Without social media, Twitch may have never heard about this issue, or they wouldn't have solved it as quickly. Customer experience is also becoming more important as established players face more pressure to deliver strong experiences across all interactions. Lower barriers to entry from digital technology have led to a slew of players creating the optimal experience or trying to create the optimal experience for very small pieces of the value stream. Incumbents, in turn, have to respond by improving their experiences or risk being dismembered, being kind of pulled apart. So in the hotel industry, the large chains offer a one-stop shop, but there are now players looking to unbundle that process by creating the optimal experience in bookings or the stay or activities. For example, with Marriott, you have limited options for late night snacking. You can use the notoriously overpriced minibar or the limited room service menu. However, as a friend of mine discovered, if your 4-year-old must have a hot dog at 11 p.m., you can use DoorDash to get it delivered directly to your room, circumventing the built-in hotel experience. Each individual hot dog is not going to impact Marriott's bottom line, but each of these pieces being taken away can add up and have a significant impact. For physical products, inexpensive and fast manufacturing has made the minimum product more accessible, but it's also led to increased homogeneity, making it harder to differentiate on the product alone. Instead, companies are turning to the broader experience to differentiate. In 1983, the Sears catalog had 5 phone options, all served through Bell. Today, a search for phones on Amazon returns over 100,000 results. With so many options, customers will choose a phone based on the sleek and modern feeling of shopping at the Apple Store or the helpfulness and personal touch of T-Mobile's experts. In the team of experts model, T-Mobile's service teams sit in the same physical locations of the customers they serve. So the Seattle team only serves customers who live in Seattle. A friend of mine was recently deciding whether to get her new phone mailed to her or pick it up in the store. The team of experts helped her make that decision. They went above and beyond by calling her local store and finding out that that day there wasn't a long wait. That interaction, that extra effort they put in, drove her loyalty to T-Mobile, and much more than the phone itself could have. And it really paid for the company because once she was in the store, she spent about $100 on accessories. Speaking more broadly of telecom, Sprint found that by focusing on CX efforts, they were able to reduce service calls by 18%. And considering about on average, a service call costs $3, that adds up to a lot of savings. With the increasing power of customers, companies have a greater incentive to proactively create great experiences. So historically, companies were reactive, talking to customers only when and if they reached out. So not at all a real-time experience. Today, companies are proactive, at least for some experiences. So think the banner letting you know of upcoming site maintenance. However, the best experiences are those that are predictive. Amazon does this incredibly well with frequently bought together and other customers often buy. It's very frustrating to go to a brick and mortar store to buy a lamp, get home and realize you don't have the right light bulbs. I've had the experience of buying something in a store, realizing I didn't have the bulb or battery or whatever gizmo, and that's been enough friction that I've used my next trip to return my purchase versus getting that accessory. Amazon removes that friction and it pays. About 35% of gross sales for Amazon.com are from those predictive interactions. The dollar value of customer experience can also be seen in Delta's transformation. Delta invested in experiences that really resonated with customers, like miles that never expire, better in-flight snacks and entertainment, and more premium offerings. They also heard by really listening to customers that the greatest source of dissatisfaction was cancellations due to maintenance issues. By reducing maintenance-driven cancellations, Net Promoter Score, which is a measure of customer satisfaction, increased. And over the same time, Delta's per passenger revenue premium over the industry increased as well. And to me, this is what is so exciting about CX, is it's not just something that customers appreciate. It's not just something that they like when it's done. It's something that pays for businesses. When you think about Sprint and the cost savings, or Delta and how it helped them grow their revenue faster than competitors. So to measure CX, data is needed. CX data tells you sentiment and how customers feel. It's not just the what of operational metrics like book deals or per unit revenue. CX data also creates empathy. So hearing how Aris, the CEO of the skincare brand, felt in the first example, it's much more relatable than just a metric that wait time is 30 minutes. Rebecca is going to talk more about CX data, how it's measured, and how insights can be gathered from it. Rebecca?
Thank you, Jackie. Now, there are a lot of ways in which you can listen to the voice of your customer, right? Survey programs are often the method of choice because surveys are typically low cost, high volume, and they can also be a proactive reaching out moment between the company and the customer after an experience. Some common examples of this are after a customer service call, during a website transaction, or some usage like logging on, or more broadly at the brand relationship level. There are plenty of other methods to take in how customers are feeling, however. Social media, as you might think, is a big one. You can also think of product reviews, for example, Amazon or on the app stores. You can do focus groups, user interviews, and even the raw text from support tickets, emails, and chats. As we talk about analyzing data, I'm going to focus on a fairly standard survey program, but you can think about enriching this data with plenty of other sources as well. So let's walk through the life of a survey, and we'll use this as an example. Say Janet buys a bicycle online for Christmas, but it was very popular, went out of stock, and her order was canceled. Now it's in January, she still hasn't gotten a refund. She's going to call up the retailer, and after an hour on hold, she finally gets a hold of someone who is able to quickly process her refund. 2 days later, Janet's gotten an email asking her for her feedback on the experience. Now, Janet is skeptical that anyone's listening to this, right? But she's stuck at home, she's got 5 minutes, what the heck, and she kind of wants to complain a little bit. So she takes the survey, gives a 5 out of 10 on her experience, and writes, "I should have gotten a refund automatically, not after I was stuck on hold for an hour. I checked the website, but I couldn't find where to request one either." Survey sent off, Janet goes back to her life, but this is where some analytics paired with empathy uses this feedback to create better experiences for customers like Janet. So let's pivot to Ron. Now, Ron works in operations for this retailer, and he's tracking all the surveys that mention wait times, including Janet's, and he's seeing a spike in these comments. Putting this together with the call data and operational metrics that he's tracking, he sees that the wait times are up to over 30 minutes on average, when they were closer to 10 minutes 2 months ago. Armed with this data, he launches a callback feature so customers don't have to spend the entire time on the phone. Post-launch, monitoring the effect on customer experience, and sure enough, not only did the number of customers mentioning wait time go down, the customer satisfaction went up as well. Now, if we look at Sharon, now Sharon is a product manager and the website is her purview. So she's tracking all the surveys that mention the website. She sees this feedback and realizes that the refund request form is actually in a super unintuitive place, right? And moves it back up into the main support area. She also proposes that maybe we can implement a back-end process that's going to scrub through all the canceled orders to see who hasn't reordered or received a credit yet and automatically process that just like Janet requested. To complete the trifecta here, we have Kevin, who's a marketing analyst, and he hears about the steps that Ron and Sharon have taken during a company meeting, and he adds a small banner to the website or to their newsletter or what have you saying, "We heard you. We took these actions to make your experience that much better. Thank you for your business and thank you for your feedback." This closes the loop with Janet. This makes her feel appreciated as a customer, and now she's looking forward to the next interaction with the company. Now, you could say, even without that survey, Ron should have noticed the spike in wait times and put that callback feature in place regardless. You could even say that he should have noticed that the percentage of people who are calling support to get a refund is way too high and notified Sharon there's something weird with the website. You would be completely correct. Both of these things could have happened via a robust operational metric analysis. However, what would be missing there, as you might guess, is the customer perspective. What companies think matters to customers could be a complete non-issue as far as their overall satisfaction, whereas something that corporations don't even have on the radar could be a huge pain point. If you think of a pizza company, Jackie mentioned Domino's, maybe they're cracking down on driver route efficiency and they want to advertise this with eco-friendly buzzwords, right? But the customers at the end of this newly efficient route are getting cold pizza and they actually couldn't care less about the gasoline. And the company has no way to track that the customers are getting cold pizza unless they tell them. Additionally, if you think of metrics that are defined by the company without the customer in mind, these are more often than not going to be broken out by the department. So sales is going to be tracking their conversions and upsells and cross-sells, finance is tracking their prompt invoices, products is tracking usage, site crashes, and so on and so forth. However, the average customer is not going to be able to break down their interaction with the company based on which department they spoke with. They're going to care about their experience with the brand overall. I don't care about my experience with Apple. I don't segment this by Genius Bar versus the salespeople in the store versus the customer service folks. It's all bundled up into one experience, right? Asking Janet about her satisfaction with the sales side of the website versus the support side of the website is likely to not only not get useful data because Janet doesn't actually know where that line exists, but it's also going to increase her frustration at being asked what is, from her perspective, the same question twice. Delivering these great experiences is the responsibility of all parts of an organization. And so it's the company's responsibility to parse out the customer data to make sure it gets where it needs to go, to help sales deliver straightforward customer processes, to help marketing accurately represent the brand and value proposition, to help operations create seamless process, right? Last but not least on metrics, customer needs do change over time. A company could have done focus group after user interview and honed in on what precisely is driving customer satisfaction for their customers and produced flawless metrics. And they still could have been blindsided by COVID and had to shift gears completely. If they don't keep their finger on the customer pulse on an ongoing basis, they're not going to know what's important to their current customers and won't be able to act and adapt accordingly. Now, let's talk about data. So at a sky-high level, there are two kinds of data in CX. Right? There are numbers and there are words. You're going to need at least one source of both to make actual magic happen. Remember I mentioned that Janet gave a 5 out of 10, and she also left that comment about wait times not being able to find the refund request? One of each. Let's talk about numbers first. So at a minimum, a company is usually going to be collecting a key metric data point. This could be the net promoter score, overall satisfaction, likelihood to purchase again, anything on a numeric scale. 0 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to 7, it doesn't matter. Anything that's going to result in a single number on a sliding scale. Of course, many companies also ask additional number-based questions, typically known as drivers, and that they would drive the main score up or down. These are things like employee knowledgeability, wait time, hotel room cleanliness. I'm going to focus on the key metrics here, but the same concepts are going to apply to other numerical questions, of course. So with numbers alone, we don't have any text data at all. One of the best ways to extract insights and actions is via journey-based analysis or customer segmentation. And this is where your operational metrics do come into play, right? So you can look at the touch points that a customer interacted with along their journey with your company. Maybe the customers who are trying to exchange a product have a significantly lower score than all of the other touch points. And there's some kind of inefficiency in that journey that's causing the frustration there. Or if you're thinking about customer segmentation, maybe customers who spend above a certain amount are more than usually frustrated with the support experience, and there's a potential for a premium support offering. The more ways you have to slice your data, the more ways you can identify unexpected low points or high points in the data and dig a little deeper. One of the good ways to visualize this is in a pivot table or a heat map, right? Think of a car dealership. You have various interactions. You've got sales, leasing, maintenance, trade-in across all of your dealerships. You can slice the scores by dealership versus journey, and you can see immediately popping out in the red cells that there is something wrong with the maintenance department in Fremont. And the trade-in process in Redwood City is really alarming, right? So the heat map is a great way to instantly see these hotspots of issues based on the data that you do have. That's just what you can do with, if you have no text at all you have is this number question, right? However, as you might guess, it's with the open-ended questions that you can get down to business. Numbers are going to hone in on where to look further, but it's the customer that's going to tell you in words that the reason they hate bringing their car in for maintenance is because the waiting room reeks of gasoline. You're not going to get that in a number, right? Now, for text analysis, there are as many ways to analyze text as the day is long. So I'm just going to touch on 3 main ways to break down that data. One of the most prevalent methods here is topic-based analysis. This is kind of the top-down approach. These are going to be topics like employee helpfulness, bathroom cleanliness, website ease of use, so on and so forth. These are usually predefined by the business analyst or the text analytics team. And so you do run the same risk of you don't know what you don't know that you have with the operational metrics that we talked about. But it can still be a great way to bucket and capture surveys that are of interest to you and your teams. Another slightly more organic way of looking at open-ended data would be via word association or clustering. And this is kind of the bottoms-up approach. Here you might group words together that appear frequently together in these comments. For example, employee might appear frequently with helpful, with service, with knowledge. These would form the clusters, and then you can do the analysis based on those groupings. The third way would be a sentiment or emotion analysis. Now, this is typically done with a trained machine learning model. I said the buzzword. I'm not a data scientist. I can't talk about that. But how this works at a high level, it would flag the phrases as positive, negative, or neutral, or with more depth into the emotions, you can get happy, angry, frustrated, and so on. Now, these are just the ways to do the segmentation, right? And even with just this information, you can do some interesting stuff. So you can track the frequency as a percentage of comments that mention certain topics over time. And as spikes occur, you see these are things that are of timely interest to your customers. If you're using sentiments and topics together, you can see how positive or happy your customers are when they talk about various product lines or service experiences and so on. And then when you're digging deeper into these issues, you always have the full text to read through for any additional details and ideas. Now, again, that's just with text, presuming you have no numbers at all. The real magic is going to happen when you combine both types of data. So imagine the word association clusters that I mentioned just earlier. This is employee helpfulness, service, and knowledge. Instead of having to ask the customer these questions as drivers, on a scale of 0 to 10, how satisfied are you with the employee's helpfulness, with the employee's knowledge? You can glean it directly from what they're telling you in words. As an added bonus, you can make your survey shorter, which is always a good thing. If the NPS scores for folks who mentioned the employee knowledge are lower than average, there's probably a need for some additional training, maybe on that new product line that just came out. Or say you want to dig into that concern with the maintenance department in Fremont. You can benchmark the customer sentiment for various topics against the other dealerships as a whole. And you can see that the average sentiment is extremely negative when they're talking about the billing process when compared to the other dealerships, specifically around a lack of transparency. Working with the service manager there to restructure their invoices and provide more details could really move the needle for that dealership. You can even track the impact that certain topics have on your key metric. And this is comparing populations that have mentioned and have not mentioned certain things. So it's basically a weighted average, but let's talk through an example really quick. Say your average satisfaction for everyone is an 8. Not bad. Then if you look at the average satisfaction of people who mention wait times, it's down at a 5. Not great, but kind of expected. Then if you look at the satisfaction for everyone who did not mention wait times, it's up at 8.5. You can then consider the impact of wait times to be a minus 0.5, because that's what happens to the score when you add that population back into consideration. It goes from 8.5 down to 8. At that point, you can rank all the topics by their impact, and voila, you have a prioritized list of what is bothering your customers the most. These are just some examples. Obviously, there are countless ways to slice and dice your customer data once you have it in hand. I did just want to highlight some of the more common or easily accessible methods that you can use to bubble up these insights. Of course, no conversation about customer experience management would be complete without touching on the concept of closing the loop. Remember Kevin, the marketing analyst, and he publicized the actions that Ron and Sharon took to make customers aware that they are listening and taking steps to improve their experience? That's a key component of a CX program that takes it away from market research, which is just data collection and then you report and then you collect more data, into a real-time customer-focused engine. There are two main parts to closing the loop. These are often referred to as the inner and the outer loop. The inner loop is the connection with customers. It's human, it's empathetic. It's the store manager reaching out after they get feedback about a terrible experience a customer had, maybe to apologize, offer a discount, or ask how they can improve. Now, it could have been a singular experience, right? A snippy employee having a bad day, something that can be addressed in-house, so to speak, not really a corporate issue. But maybe it's a broader concern. Maybe there's some promotion going on, but in the fine print, it excludes every brand name under the sun, and customers are getting irritated that it doesn't get applied at checkout. That is something that would feed into the outer loop, which is more of a corporate level meta-analysis of the inner loop results. This is where a team would learn from the issues of this promotion and improve on the next one. Or maybe an increasing number of unhappy customers are unable to find things on the website, and it's time to reassess the layout. This is also where some great A/B testing can be done in the back and forth between the inner and the outer loop. You have trial runs of a new website structure or a new account management model, new call center feature on a subset of your customers to see if it actually moves the needle before investing in the change management and the cost to roll things out across the entire customer base. So we're going to wrap up here. I wanted to highlight a couple of takeaways from this discussion, and then we're going to move straight into questions. So as a consumer, we are all consumers, right? Have some empathy. The disembodied voice at the end of the phone is a real person. They may even be compensated in part by the feedback that you give, even though that's a terrible idea. You shouldn't do that. Do be kind when you're giving feedback. Do also give ideas. The ideas you give matter. They wouldn't be asking if they didn't want you to help them with how they can improve, right? Do be specific. What were you trying to do? What went wrong? What should have happened instead? This is going to help the company develop solutions that are actually solving the problems that you're having. I would also say to consider the full experience. So if you had an issue with a specific part of your experience, highlight that definitely. But if the rest of your interactions were pleasant, the salesperson was kind, it's worth giving the full picture so that the company can fix what needs fixing, but also give credit where credit is due. Now, as an innovator, a CX innovator trying to improve the experience, first things first, ask questions. Customers cannot tell you if you're not asking them, right? What do you really want to know? That said, be brief. Do not ask too many questions. No one likes a 25-page survey. And honestly, the utility and richness of that data is going to take a nosedive after page 6 if you try. When you're working inside your company to actually make change, do tell stories that you get from this feedback. Customers are really good at explaining why things are important. It's emotional. You ruined their day, right? Listen to what they're saying and then use those experiences to highlight the problems and opportunities to improve. Of course, the plural of anecdote is not data. So anecdotes are the highlight reel here, but you do want to make sure you use the data that you have so that the analysis backs up the innovations that you're trying to put into place. That was everything we have prepared today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll take questions.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. So our first question, can you use the Amazon example when describing a proactive experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that, generally most companies are offering a large number of most companies' interactions today are proactive. And that's kind of like the baseline of what good looks like today. So for Amazon, if I'm thinking about a proactive interaction they have, I'd think about delivery notifications, right? So they let you know, okay, here's where it is through the shipping process, lets you know the day it's arriving. You have some flexibility based on what notifications you sign up for. So I'd call that proactive because, they're letting you know of things ahead of time, but they're not kind of guessing what you need to know next. And then can I actually go directly into the next question? Because I think to me, it relates pretty strongly.
Sure, let me read the next question. So what do you think some of the next big innovations or shifts in customer experience might look like?
Yeah, so I think predictive interactions are what the next generation of customer experience and really, really delightful customer experiences will look like. So, and I think customer experience measurement and customer experience data is a big part of that. So like, if you know that Jackie is very similar to Rebecca in the products she has and how she interacts with our company, and you know that Jackie didn't like X, Y, and Z, you're going to have a good guess that Rebecca will not like those things either. And then you should use that to kind of tweak what Rebecca is going to see or what Rebecca is going to experience, or when you reach out to Rebecca to help use the data from Jackie for Rebecca to have a delightful experience.
Yeah, and I would say to add on to that, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more data sources taken into account when you're looking at CX. I think the survey program is, the golden standard, but I think there are so many other ways that you can bring in data that customers are talking all over the place on the internet, right? Like there's always a way to bring this data in and use it to enrich the data that they're telling you and get a much more holistic picture of your customers as a whole and also individually to feed into that predictive analysis that Jackie was mentioning.
Great, thank you. So CX is not something that this alum learned about at Mudd. How did you two find your way into this space, and how would an interested current student or alum explore it as a career option?
I'll go first. So I didn't jump into this right out of school. I actually went and did consulting with Bain for a year, and I got headhunted by Medallia. And to work in the professional services department in front of their clients as an interface between the software and the client business requirements. So I got very lucky because I think the space is incredible. As far as exploring this as a career option, ping me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to hook you up with any number of CX connections I've made over the last 6 years of my experience in the industry.
Yeah, and I would add that I think of kind of myself as someone who's like in strategy and someone who's really excited about things that are at that intersection of strategy, tech innovation, and analytics. And when I think about CX, that's exactly what CX is, right? It's like, okay, really big picture, what should we do? But then also like in the details of how should we execute? Plus it's data. It's a lot of data and using that data to make decisions. And it's technology, right? Like there's both the technology of how do you take all this information and crunch it the way Rebecca described, but also today, customers expect digital experiences. And so when you think about how you're going to deliver those better experiences in the future, it's a very large percent of it is through digital and through new innovations.
Great, thank you. So in line with that, so do you think Mudd prepared you for consulting? Did Mudd provide perhaps an edge that you thought was beneficial in your line of work?
Rebecca,
you go ahead.
First, or should
Okay, I'll go first. Yes, I do think Mudd prepared me very well for consulting, both from an analytics perspective and a people perspective. Analytically, I didn't use Fourier transforms at Bain, all right? It wasn't really the specifics of what you learn in the classes, but it was more the ability to take a project on a clinic level, right? Something that's multiple semesters, break it down into manageable pieces of what you know, what you can assume, what you can find out, and making reasonable assumptions to build this all back together into a workable solution. I think that the level of the analytical framework that we received at Mudd definitely, I think, gave an edge over some of the other business school folks. On the people side, I think the Mudd focus on group presentations, group works, solutions don't come up in a vacuum, and working with other people and making the presentations it definitely helped maybe get a leg up from the other more analytical folks who didn't have the presentational background to be put in front of clients. So I definitely think that it did prepare us very well for consulting.
Yeah, and I'd completely echo that. I think Mudd has a lot of group work and a lot of situations where you need to build consensus. And I think that's a huge piece of working in a business world or working in a consultative role. So that was very helpful. I'd also say that having that basic technology background and expertise is also helpful. Business people love to use technology terms that they don't really understand. So like, you have no idea how many times I see people talk about APIs or machine learning and they have no concept. So Rebecca's laughing. So I think just having a little bit of the meter there is helpful.
Great, thank you. So this next question is 2 parts. How did you find and why did you choose Harvey Mudd? The responsibility for laser focus on CX and delighting the customers often incorrectly deemed the domain of brand marketing and strategy teams. How have you as engineers partnered to own and triumph in these areas?
Okay, so I'll take the first question there first. So I found Harvey Mudd through FAST, and then I did the FAST program. I don't know if that still exists, Vanessa. And then I wound up doing the President's Scholars program. And I really was excited about Mudd and chose Mudd because I wanted to have a really strong engineering school and a really strong engineering program, but also have opportunities to do other things as well. So, I did the Robert Day Scholars program to CMC. I was a diver for CMS. And so I think, those were having the opportunity to do those kinds of things were something I really appreciated and why I chose Mudd.
Yeah, I'll go for the first part of the question too, and then we can tackle the second. I found out about Harvey Mudd because that's where my parents met. And my twin sister did early decision at Harvey Mudd, and so I applied to. And it was between this and another small engineering school because I decided that I really wanted to have this small experience undergraduate where the professors are focused on teaching as opposed to their grants and their research. And what was the other point? Oh, and then the other reason that I chose was because I wasn't actually sold on what I wanted to major at that point. And I really liked the academic rigor on a broad spectrum that Harvey Mudd offered so that I could really get my hands dirty in a whole bunch of different disciplines and make an educated decision instead of having to choose to enter into like a school at, UCB or something.
And to the second part of the question, so I would make this on t-shirts if I could. CX is a responsibility of everyone. I'm going to say it again. CX is a responsibility of everyone. Engineering is absolutely a critical part of customer experience. In fact, I'd say it's like one of the most critical parts of customer experience, right? If you aren't designing products and services in a way that works for people, you're doing something wrong, right? Like ultimately everyone has a customer and you want to be designing things so that designing and building and maintaining things so that they're going to delight whoever that end user is.
Yeah, and I would say from my experience working with customers when I was in professional services, this is the most successful clients who really were the ones who adopted the customer-centric mindset across all departments, right? It wasn't just, we typically work with like a core CX team. It's 8, 12 people or something like that within the corporation. But the ones where that team reported to the CEO and they controlled decisions because the customer was the most important part of the business. Across, we worked with a bunch of IT teams to make sure they were capturing what we needed in order to draw useful insights out of the data. Working with marketing, sure, but also working with sales to make sure that their account management represented what customers actually wanted to be, how they wanted to be dealt with, right? Those are the successful organizations, were the ones that it was fully part of the heartbeat.
Great, thank you. Oh, and Jackie, yes, the program still exists. So our next question, how do you encourage median feedback so that it is not entirely bimodal? People who really liked an experience and want to say so, and more often than not, people who really disliked it and have an over-the-top negative thing to say or singular anecdote.
So it looks like I'm going to have a chance to talk about Net Promoter Score after all. So this is one of the main ways that we talk, one of the golden standards of the key metrics is called Net Promoter Score. And the calculation that it does is it takes the percentage of all the answers who gave a 9 and 10, which are, we call these the promoters, right? These are the folks who are telling their neighbors, they're telling their aunts and uncles, like they're telling everyone that like their experience was great. And then we subtract the people who gave a 0 through 6 on this question. Because these are the people, we all know a 5 is a failing score. It's like giving a 3 on an Uber ride, right? Like that means something went wrong. And these people are the ones who are saying, no, actually I had this really not great experience. You maybe should go to T-Mobile. And so the 0 through 6 are your detractors. So part of the way that you avoid the passive folks, the 7s and 8s, not giving that much feedback is you don't really consider them that much in the equation because you're looking at the relationship between the number of promoters that you have and can create versus the number of detractors that you have and can save. But the way that you increase the number of people giving feedback who don't have a strong opinion one way or the other is really make your survey short. Make it very accessible,
Amen.
very easy to take.
Thank you.
And say, when you're asking customers for feedback, this is a 2-question survey. It will take 30 seconds. Like tell them. So
but be honest. Don't say it's going to be 30 seconds if it's actually going to be 10 minutes. Sorry.
Oh yeah, don't do that either. but really, it's if you want the broad spectrum of feedback of people who have more medium experiences, it's just making it much easier for everyone and like remove friction for people to give you feedback. And then using the way you calculate your metrics can also weight the ones who are going to affect your brand perception a little more as well.
Hey, thank you. Is there any data related to negative impacts of proactive CX? I know when I buy something online, one of the easiest way to get me to not buy from the same retailer is to be interrogated by an unsolicited survey request. Sometimes consumers don't want to feel like they have to teach a company how to do their job.
So I think we'll probably both have things to say on this. So I'll start and then Rebecca jump in. So I think there's a few things I think about here. So first of all, I don't think it's really teaching a company how to do their job. I think it's about, like Rebecca was saying, that customers provide a really unique perspective, and sometimes operational metrics are not enough to understand that perspective. And like I was saying through my social media example, when feedback comes directly from customers, when there's that empathy piece and really understanding the effect firsthand, it can help companies resolve issues faster and better, like really get at the root cause. So I would kind of take that a little bit more of a little bit more positive overview there. So then in terms of negative impacts of proactive, yes, absolutely. So I'll give an example is I just got a puppy. A friend of mine sent me a dog bed, right? Like really cute dog bed. We were all excited about this, but they actually sent an email asking, first of all, they sent an email to her asking how she liked the dog bed. When it was sent to me, something again, like Rebecca was saying, when you should be able to use, in the ideal case, you use data from different sources to make sure you're sending things to the right spot. You're sending the survey to the right person, A. B, I haven't actually gotten it yet. So sending that email before I got it just reminded all of us that it hasn't shown up yet. So again, that's where you have to be companies have to be really smart about combining their data sources in the right way to make sure they aren't, constantly emailing customers or constantly contacting customers for surveys. Like they need to spread them out and rest in between them. And they also need to make sure they're sent kind of in the sweet spot of time, right? Like close enough to, if it's an interaction type survey, close enough where it's going to be relevant and customers will remember, but like right time and place, not too early, not before a customer has received a product, things like that. Rebecca, do you want to add on?
Yeah, I want to echo what you said, is that a lot of the consideration when putting a survey program like this in place is when to survey and when not to survey. You want the survey close to when they've had the experience and when you can be sure they've had the experience. So like, don't ask someone about their product if it's still in transit, right? But also there's a careful consideration of how quickly is too quick to survey again, even on a completely separate transaction, right? Like, is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like, how do you make sure this person isn't being pestered? And that does come up often when looking into if customers are saying, if my customers at Medallia are saying that their response rates are low, we will often look at it, are people saying, stop emailing me? that is something that we do look at, and then we might adjust the, the rules there. That's definitely a very real thing. Survey fatigue, email fatigue is.
Oh, two more things I want to add on that one. So first of all, one thing that can sometimes make it better or make that less of an issue is if the survey is offered kind of in the moment. So for example, if like before you close out of a website, if again, there's a very brief survey asking for feedback, that can be a strategy. Another thing that I'll also add is when you are in those business to business settings, in a lot of business settings, there's a relationship manager that's like responsible for the care and feeding of a customer. And so they use, they often have like a first look. So they can say like, actually, I already know about Susie's customer experience right now and that she's not happy. So let's wait 6 months before we ask her how she feels about our company. So that's another strategy that's employed as well.
Great, thank you. So for a product which isn't in market yet, do you have any tips on how to keep the customer front and center in the development process?
I would say, I mean, you still can ask people, right? They're not customers, but I think there's always opportunities to kind of get feedback, run things by people. I think there's a balance there because you also want to have kind of like a clarity of vision and, like deliver something that's like a true sort of overall solution versus like a Frankenstein of a lot of different pieces. But again, I think even before something launches, there's many opportunities and many different ways to get feedback, structured, unstructured, all that good stuff. Rebecca, do you want to add on?
Yeah, I think definitely listening to your potential users in the beta, alpha, early adopter phases of development is critical. Like Jackie said, you don't want like everyone under the sun to chime in on this necessarily, but if it's a new product in an existing line, you might take your most frequent users of the latest model and ask them if they want to participate in a beta and give their feedback on the next one, right? So you make sure you get relevant feedback, but definitely, there's no reason you can't ask for feedback from people who would be using the system before it's, live or produced or whatever you're producing.
Yeah, and like, I completely agree. Or like, we talked about Delta, right? Delta didn't know before they launched Miles That Never Expire that was like, they didn't know, right? That was by definition a product they hadn't launched or a feature they hadn't launched, but they knew from feedback they had already gotten or from social media or from wherever that was a pain point. And then once they did launch it, they could measure and listen. And then that provided the basis of which to like readjust or make changes in the future.
Great, thank you. So how do you How do you characterize the work that you do? More specifically, would you say your work is in product management, consulting, product design, user experience, or some combination?
So I'd say, sort of like I mentioned before, I'd say strategy, innovation, analytics, and kind of those all get mixed together and like inform working on a really great customer experience and making that better.
I don't think that question was directed at me. I'm a release manager. I'm none of those things.
Great. Our next question, if your company works with any health insurance companies, do you ever say you're adding consult to injury? What is the most useful skill you've found or cultivated that makes you and your team more successful?
Love the pun.
I never have said that, but I might start. Useful skill that makes me and my team more successful. Again, I work on the engineering side of the house now, so this is probably a slightly different question than CX. But for us, I would say it's adaptability and not being beholden to the way things have been done just because they have been done that way. I guess the entire engineering organization is my customer. So when their needs shift, it doesn't matter that I've been doing this the same way for 3 years. Now it's time to do something else. And I think it's the same way on the folks who are more CX side of things. It doesn't matter that like, this is the survey we've been asking for 3 years. it's okay to change it. You need to adapt and like don't be too bogged down to the way that you have done things previously just for the sake of it.
Great. What ideas do you have for someone who loves these principles but finds themselves in a company or organization that maybe doesn't share that love?
So I'd say the first question I'd have, or the first question I think about, is whether the customer voice has been heard firsthand. Like, I'd say that once you can personalize something, once you can create empathy, it probably will be easier to like push for great customer experience. So like anything you can do to help get the like absolute firsthand, not, oh, I've heard customers say, but the literal direct quote or video or physical customer in person talking about their pain point, I'd say that's the first step to helping change that kind of culture. Rebecca, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this comes back to the use stories piece for the innovation. Your company, department, whatever it is, may not listen to this just you saying that like this is really important, despite the fact that there are billions of case studies showing the exact opposite. But seeing a customer, you know, reading their feedback or showing a video of them that's like, I'm stopping using your product because this makes me angry and you haven't done anything. Like that's something that's for better or for worse, a little more impactful. And then taking that with, there are some very approachable low cost or zero cost solutions to put this in place at like a bare minimum level to start getting feedback and hearing from people. If it's worth a trial run, if you can convince based on the emotion of the customer story and the case studies that have shown that this to be move the bottom line and be very impactful, if you can get your foot in the door with one of these low cost solutions and just show that you can make positive change, then that's oftentimes the wedge you need to open up into a much more customer centric vision.
And there are even like free solutions, right? Like finding out what people say on social media, that doesn't cost a cent, or you know, like an Amazon review, or even like I've had the experience of people are like, oh, you work at such and such place, well, let me tell you, and then just write it down. So free or low cost questions.
Great. So we have a question regarding competition analysis. Where does the aspect of competitor understanding enter the CX process?
So I'd say it's, and again, Rebecca, feel free to jump in, but I'd say it's definitely part of the process. I'd say it kind of comes in two places. So first, I think, you know, understanding like what's best in class and what makes someone best in class can help really generate a lot of good ideas. And so like, for example, if you know that, like Rebecca gave the great example of, if you hear that, oh, people don't like our service centers, then if you know from competitor data or literally just walking around to different car dealerships that people seem to be much more smiling and happy at the, I don't know, the dealership in Kansas, like that should give you some ideas, right? So I'd say it's definitely the aspects of competitor understanding would be, what are other people doing well? And then what's that impact on scores? And there's lots of different like ways to kind of gather that both quantitatively and qualitatively. Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ways this comes up the most is in social media, right? So you're not going to ask questions masquerading as someone else, but you know who your competitors are, and there's no reason you have to scrape only your own social media data, right? You can definitely, if I'm Marriott, I can listen to what people are saying about Hilton and about Hyatt and like all these other brands. And of course, I think they're all the same hotel company at the top nowadays anyway. But if you listen to all of them, right, you can see what topics are bubbling up in their comments. And if people are really happy about something, can you look at how to improve your offering there? Or maybe when people mention your name in their comments, right, like what's happening with that? So it's definitely competitive analysis on an ongoing basis often looks like just pulling all the data that you can for the rivals that you've already identified, your competitors.
Great, thank you. So to be respectful of time, this will be our last question. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions so far. So in terms of CX data, how do you quantify customers who don't provide feedback yet? who don't provide feedback yet have a positive experience, what assumptions are made to perfect the CX model for the employer to assess customers' true experience in absence of this data?
So I think there's a couple of ways that you can approximate the silent customers, right? For example, in a B2B model where you know who all of your customers are, you have their emails and their billing information, right? You know precisely who is not answering. And I will say often the silent customers are the ones who are less happy in that case. And that's often a predictive sign of people who are about to turn. But you can see who people who start answering and, approximate that as a percentage of like these people. We generally see 25% of the score or 30% of the score. You can approximate it in the same way that the data that you're actually getting. That gets really dangerous, and it doesn't really give you any more useful insights from your data because you're imposing a percentage on people that haven't actually responded, and that can get dangerous because they may not feel that way. The way to hone in on this is, I think, something we talked about a little bit before, is to increase your response rates. Like, you really just want as much feedback as you can, whether you get it from the surveys that you're sending, from comments that people make on support chats is another way to bring in how people might be feeling during their issue resolution calls instead of on the survey they're ignoring. Basically just to increase the amount of exposure and data that you have on each customer to get a better sense. It doesn't have to be via the email you send them every 6 months, right?
I think you covered it. Hey, Vanessa, you're on mute.
Thanks. So first off, I want to thank Jackie and Rebecca for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge and insights with us. Thank you to our audience for your questions and for attending this event. We will follow up within the next week with a recorded video and presentation material. Up next on our Mudd Talks is Making a Makerspace with Professor Jeff Groves on Thursday, January 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. An announcement for current parents, Family February registration is now open. Please visit hmc.edu/parents for the schedule of events and registration link. All upcoming events can be found on our online offerings page using the link included in your confirmation email or by visiting alumni.hmc.edu and clicking on online offerings. We welcome any suggestions you may have for upcoming events, or if you are interested in hosting one, please email us at alumni@hmc.edu. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day. Have a great night, everyone.